Our first session will focus on financial support for childbearing, discussing various incentives such as child allowances, tax benefits, and baby bonuses. So I would like to welcome all speakers for this session to the stage, plus Professor Ki-Soo Eun of Seoul National University, who will introduce the speakers and also moderate the discussion.
Okay, good morning again. We have enjoyed very insightful presentations and discussions, from yesterday, focusing on very good potential, policies of fertility, such as parental leave, empowering youths and childcare yesterday. And today, we are going to deal with the other potential, policy issues, such as, for example, the financial support, housing, and gender and social norms, for example. Okay, so these are very important topics to meet the challenges of the demographic crisis, including the drastic decline of fertility in many advanced countries and Korea as well. So this session focuses on the effect of, for example, financial support, which, for example, was implemented in some, for example, Western societies. So we are looking for some good implications of these, for example, fertility policies of the financial support, throughout fancy presentations by three speakers and the two discussants. So I'd like to introduce the first speaker, Dr. Laurent Toulemon from France. Okay. French Institute for Demographic Studies. So I expect he would address the, for example, experience of the French societies focusing on the financial support. Would you please? Okay. Tomas first? Yeah, obviously. Yes, thank you very much.
So sorry, I'm not Laurent. My presentation goes first. What I want to discuss a little bit in 5 minutes time is an argument that the most important financial intervention in terms of supporting parents should happen in the early stage of the child's life, ideally in the first 3 years of the child's life. So when we think about the total costs of raising a child over the course of until the child becomes adult or until the child graduates from the university. This is one of the estimates for the US. It's already 10 years old. This is including the cost just until the age of 18. This is without the cost of tuition fees, university education. So if you factor in the inflation since then and the university education, the price tag for an average US child to the average US parents comes somewhere between $400,000, $500,000 US. When we move to Korea, where the incomes are on average lower than the US, the huge costs of education to Korean parents, paying for all the tuition fees, come into the picture very, very clearly. And according to one newspaper headline, Korea is the most expensive country in the world to raise kids, exactly because of these huge education expenditures, which are bigger than the expenditures for housing and other things when you count it per person within the families, at least during the time when kids are growing up. And thinking about these huge costs of children and comparing this with government incentives, tax policies, financial support for childbearing, you can easily make up the picture, connect the points, and come to the conclusion that there is no way that the governments can achieve meaningful, long-lasting increases in fertility just by stimulating just by rolling out new financial incentives or increasing financial incentives for childbearing, because governments will never put enough money on the table for families to really change the equations for parents when thinking about having another child. This is not saying that financial incentives are not important. Many of them do matter for families and for parents. This is just to say that they just don't fundamentally change people's decisions about childbearing in most of the cases. Many of the government schemes are relatively symbolic, and here I am referring especially to schemes like baby bonuses, which are in some countries' favorite playgrounds of the governments, because it's easy to roll out a new baby bonus. Say, we pay 2,000 euros to every new child being born in Spain or in Greece or in Australia or in Quebec. If you compare 2,000 euros with the lifetime costs of having a child, this is peanuts. You cannot bribe parents into having another child for this money. Taxation policies are also relevant in many countries, but they are often complicated and they are often benefiting only higher earners. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Often incentives, financial incentives, place focus on higher order births. If you don't have the first birth, doing a lot of policy focus on financially supporting higher order births is also misplaced. And often financial incentives are not addressing the most costly expenditures and obstacles parents are facing, including housing, which has been mentioned extensively in Melinda's presentation, and early childcare costs. So here are some examples of relatively generous family policies in terms of financial support to parents, and there is no clear-cut evidence that they would meaningfully raise fertility rates in the long term. We discussed a little bit the example of Hungary. That's one of the countries with very strong pronatalist policies. And again, they're looking at Hungarian fertility rates compared to many other countries in the broader region, Central Europe. Hungary doesn't seem to stand out in their fertility trends, whatever way you measure it, be it conventional total fertility rate or tempo-adjusted fertility rate. So here comes my argument. I don't think scientific evidence shows quite clearly that the actual and opportunity costs for parents are strongest in the first 2 years of life of the child. Period is key for avoiding poverty and for children to receive stimulating care and good nutrition. This is also important for non-employed parents or parents facing employment issues when their kids are very small, having unstable employment, because the risk of poverty is often very big in the early stage of child's life. And this could have some small positive fertility impact as well. So to give one highlight of one country where I think they are doing things relatively right, and Alan Poor from Estonia may say later on whether I'm right or not. Estonian, very generous and very flexible scheme of parental leave with 100% income replacement and a huge amount of flexibility to parents, how they allocate their approximately 475 days of leave after each child is born, is an example which I like to give and which I think should be taken by more governments. I also mentioned the Czech leave, which is interesting in the way that everyone is eligible to receive this amount of money. So it's not related to previous income. It's just a kind of sum of money people get distributed in monthly installments within the 2 to 4 years after the child is born. And a kind of cautious, non-causal demographic analysis shows that Czechia has much higher progression rates to second birth than the neighboring Slovakia with this very similar institutional system overall. But there is a caveat. These differences started before the leave. The very generous parental leave in Czechia was rolled out. So that may have just partly to do something with the leave. Then they widened after the leave was rolled out. Thank you very much.
Thank you for very insightful presentations. I'm sorry for my mistake introducing Tomas, first presenter. Okay, we'll move to the second speaker. Once again, Dr. Laurent Toulemon.
So, thank you. So that's my second try. So I'm going to say a word on the financial support from the French context. So France is known to have a very generous family policy, and especially a large share of tax breaks and also provision in cash. So that's one specificity of France since a very long time. But we have to be aware that this definition of family policy does not include all social policies, and for instance, the housing policy, part of it can be included or not if there are some family-specific benefits. There are also long-term retirement benefits for those who have children. So is that part of the family policy? We already spoke about kindergarten and the cost of education in France. Primary and secondary education are almost totally free. So the issue of the cost of raising children, educating children is totally different. And even at university, let's say the best universities are almost free, and even some students are paid. So of course, there are many social differences, but the overall picture is very different compared to other countries. So as France has a long history of family policy, it's very complicated. There are no less than 7 basic allowances. There are 3 different tax breaks regarding the family situation, specific tax reduction for childcare expenses or having an employee at home. So the system is very complex. And there are 2 shortcomings in terms of the legitimacy and the efficiency of the implementation of the policy. First, there are some inconsistencies in the policies about the side effects, and people can be out from the policy because it's sometimes very complicated to take the benefit you are allowed to have. But the overall impression in the population is that all the situations are covered, and the family policy is very inclusive. There is the idea that no matter your behavior and your family, the state will be here to support you. And this is very strong. And for instance, for the educational system, we are not so good in terms of social inequality, in terms of the success, especially there is a very large heritability of the educational success in France. It's basically a failure for a country which speaks about equal opportunities. But people do not say that they won't have too many children because it's too costly to raise them. That's not something that we hear in France because of this. The burden of education is supposed to be taken by the state. So when we look at the trends, there has been a very important trend, a move towards a pronatalist policy from a pronatalist policy to more social policy, with a decline in the tax breaks for the wealthiest and an increase in the social allowance for the poorest. So in the last 20 years, there were a decline in the allowance from the 20% wealthiest and a large increase for the 30% poorest, but nevertheless, due to the economic changes and the increase in uncertainty, there are still many families with children who are poor. It's no less than 22% in France. And there are children more and more living in precarious housing conditions. So on the one hand, there are more and more support for poor families, but on the other hand, the issue of poor families is raising. And there is a major change. The results of the family policy came from compulsory stable employers' contribution, and now it is voted in the parliament each year. So let's say that's good for the legitimacy of the policy, but when we have budget cut, it makes the family policy much more fragile. Regarding the impact on fertility, we heard many times that it's not very efficient. So the family policy as a whole may have an impact, but the cash help to the family is definitely not something which has the major impact. And we have seen that work-life balance is key, and the issue of gender inequalities at work and in the families have almost nothing to do with the allowance, the issue of childcare services. Thomas, you spoke of that, but also the labor market policies. We see that especially for one-parent families, the issue of work-life balance is very specific and raises specific issues. So we can say that, or this is what we think in France, financial support is something necessary for the families, not sufficient to raise fertility. But on the one hand, there are daily expenses for the children, and there are some vulnerable families, one-parent families, large families, which need and receive specific support. And the tax breaks are not justified by pronatalist issue, despite the fact that they are focusing on high order birth, but more on the capacity of contribution. In our law, we have the idea that people must pay tax not on an individual basis, but their capacity to contribute will be made on a household basis. And this is in our constitution. It was made by the Constitutional Court that for equity, the French idea of equity is not individuals facing the state. It's more family facing the states. And so I don't know whether this is good for fertility, but that's how we behave. So well, I already say that the public demand is more focusing on work-life balance, and this may be the most important point regarding fertility and equity. And this cash and tax allowance are not considered anymore as pronatalist policy, but more an issue of equity between families with and without children. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much on the French experiences of financial support, and it's very impressive that you once again emphasize the importance of the work-life balance instead of the financial support in dealing with the challenges of the demographic crisis. Okay, the last speaker is Mrs. Isabel Puig, CEO of IKEA Korea.
Morning, everyone. So bear with me because my speech, I'm afraid, is going to be a little bit different, right? Of course, our role as a company is different, but we take it very seriously. So it's not only about making the life at home for many people better. This is our, doesn't go, no, presentation doesn't move. Now it's coming. Thank you. So as I was saying, our mission as a company is to create a better everyday life for the many people. And I was very happy to hear Professor Mills to say that the most important place in the world is home, because we do believe, and we do have also some studies that really proves that this is true. So the better you feel at home, the better you think that you are going to be when you go back home every day, the better your life will be, the happier you will be. And when we speak about creating better everyday life at home for the many, we speak about our customers, of course, our thousands and thousands of millions of customers, but we also speak about our coworkers, because we also know that the happier our coworkers are, the happier our customers will be, and our growth will come in a sustainable way, which is very, very important for us. And when we speak about sustainability of growth, it's not only about the planet, it's also about the people that live in the planet, right? So between our business goals, there are a lot of KPIs that refer to how happy, how satisfied our coworkers are, but also how good as neighbors we are. So how involved we are into the society and the societal problems that we face in every one of the countries where we develop our activity. So just as a sneak peek, IKEA Korea was opened 10 years ago, almost. So next month, 10 years. We are 1,700 coworkers. And in a very homogeneous society as Korea, we still have 18 nationalities, which is quite an achievement, because also our diversity policies are very important. We are in the top management of IKEA Korea. We're 50-50, female and male. However, I have to say that in the whole population of IKEA Korea, we're 61% of women, meaning that the representation of the management in the management teams is not quite okay, right? So we are on the way. We are not satisfied with that because we believe that we can do better. Whenever we recruit also, we also think about who is our customer, because we want to reflect our customer. We want our customer to feel that there is a mirror so that they can see their house, they can see their wishes, they can see also their worries solved by someone who is also facing the same kind of human family life challenge. We have focused since the beginning, so 10 years ago when we opened, on this program that we call Dodam Dodam, which is a Korean, sorry for my Korean pronunciation, I'm sure that is wrong, but it's about how you see your kids growing, right? So that how you grow as a family. And of course, we focused on supporting the parents to have kids and to have the kids in a way that it's also comfortable for them. But bear with me because I do believe that the key of it is not the price tag that we put there. It's more about how we approach the question, right? So you will see that indeed we allow our parents to stay at home with the kid, paid, fully paid, double time than the Korean government provides. So it's 180 days, which in other countries might seem very little, but in Korea is quite of a, I mean, within our sector, and even I would say that within the whole business environment in Korea is quite unique, right? It means that, but for me, it's not only about this 180 days that the mothers can stay at home paid. It's also about how sure they are that when they are coming back home, look at that, back to IKEA, they will have exactly the same rights and they will be treated exactly in the same way that other mothers. So it's also about the equality of it, right? And it's also about the peace of mind that now it's time to care about your family, the most important people in the world, the children. But then when you come back to work, it's exactly the same. You are not going to be, for sure, not discriminated, but even helped to adapt to the new job, to the new environment, because of course, life has changed for you. But it's not only about mothers, actually. Actually, it's also about fathers. And that has been also not only about the time that we provide, because it's also much longer than the time that the government provides, because we pay 30 days instead of 10. It's also about how we set the example. Our first CEO here in Korea, Andres Mitgal, had a child here in Korea, and he was one of the first fathers to take this parental leave. So the lead by example, I do believe that is the maximum resource that we can put on the list of things that we do for the family, right? How our leaders also show the way to tell others that it's okay to take the parental leave. And not only okay, it's needed, right? Because there is a time for everything. But then it comes also about the bonding with the children. So how important is to bond with the children also when you are commuting? Indeed, commuting is a pain here, right? Everyone commutes very, very, very long time every day. How beautiful it is also, anyway, even if it's a pain, that you can bring your child to work, right? Because we have daycare for all our coworkers. But the thing is not only to have childcare, is also the possibility of having childcare during all opening hours of our stores, meaning that we have very extensive timetable for our daggies, so that you don't have to worry because you know that your child first is very close to you, and second is taken care by people who also work for IKEA, meaning that there is also a value-driven part that is also very important because in IKEA we also recruit by values. We don't recruit by CV. Meaning that most of the times when you meet your colleagues, you would love to have at least a beer with them or a coffee, right? Because you feel that there is this connection, so that you feel that your children also are raised by people who are very similar to you. And then there is this inclusivity part, because we also treat any kind of family the same way. so that they also can enjoy this time free, but also this reintegration to work when they are back from adoption or when they are back of having a child. So it doesn't matter if it's a single parent or it's a same-sex partnership. We always treat them the same. As I said, bear with me, because I do believe that, because whenever I meet other businesses, they always ask us, how much does that cost, right? How much does that cost? Because we do a lot of things. We do family days, so bring your family to work. We really want to be part of our coworkers' life, and above all, when these kind of events that really are life-changing happened. But I do believe that what really brings the value that what we do is our leadership by example, which is one of our core values. So what happened? And then the second one is the openness of feedback, the openness of talking about family, talking about your challenges at home, and how much people see that, for instance, myself as a CEO, I take time whenever I can, and I do also apply flexibility to my balance of life, right? So that all our coworkers, as much as we can, because of course we have a lot of coworkers who work on shift, can also take this flexibility, right? So that they are never looked at differently because they have different obligations in life, right? So we have been the example for other IKEA countries, like IKEA Japan, where they also have some challenges with, of course, fertility. And we are on the way, because I do believe that there is one thing that we never took into account, which is the cost, indeed, the very high cost of this education, of having a child here in Korea. And we helped during the first years of the life of the child, but then what else, right? What is the example that we give? And as I said, since we recruit by values and not by CV, we are also sending a message that I think is important to society, which is how important it is to be prepared, of course, but do you need to be perfect? Do you need this academic life to be perfect? So do you need to go to the top university and have 10 tutors per hours of tutor per day? Is this really needed to have a child? Because this increases, of course, the cost of having children a lot. So those are also the messages that, from a leadership perspective, I think that we are sending. And that was the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We are very much impressed with the contribution of the IKEA Korea. Okay, thank you. Enjoying three nice presentations, and it's time to discussion, very productive discussions. So we have two discussions. The first discussion is Ms. Li Rui, Advice Policy Division, Department of International Cooperation, National Health Commission in China.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ng. Hello, everyone. I'm a Chinese person. As a Chinese, I'm good at doing some homework according to the given topic. So I think I prepare well. But at the same time, it's not enough. I think my Korean colleague, he did the same thing. I think so. So at first, I should, would like to thank the three presenters for their wonderful presentations. Before I've got 2 of the 3 presentations. So except Dr. Thomas. So I think this part is not very good. Sorry. And actually, I fully agree with their main points in their presentations. I have some thoughts to share with you. OECD countries were among the first to experience a decline in fertility rates over the past 6 decades. Governments have responded with various policy initiatives to address the trends. So subsidizing childbearing to encourage fertility has long been a policy objective in these countries. So France is known with its relatively high and stable fertility rate compared to many other European countries. In my opinion, in my mind. During the policy making process, my colleagues and I, always regarded France as a good case for study. So the problem is what we should learn from the experience of France. So that's we are working on, I think. So for I totally agree with Dr. Thomas, your opinions about that financial support is a part of facility support policies. Hungary family subsidies are among the most generous in the world. According to my study. But the family subsidies in Hungary aim to reduce the direct costs of childbirth and early child care, which can be a significant factor for families. Hungary's fertility rate rose to 1.6 in 2021, but fell back to 1.5 in 2023. It shows that the subsidies have had some impact, but still suggested that more support may be needed for sustained increase. So that's, I think that has a good example of France and Hungary's experience. In my office, my colleagues, I, always these days keep our focus study on these two countries to try to find some experience that we can learn and we can draw in our policy making. For Republic of Korea is facing a same facility crisis as China. So with its fertility rate falling to a world record low of 1.7 in 2023, we know that this TFR, lowest TFR, and has a significant implications for the country's future. But we are very happy to see many Korea enterprises like Hyundai yesterday and IKEA Korea this morning. They contribute a lot to a facility support policy making in Korea. I think so. But I also agree with some professors' opinions about more comprehensive measures are needed. It's sorry, and in my opinion, it's very hard to define the burden of childbearing. In China, in some cities, especially big cities, many people, according to the past investigation, many people, couples say they feel, they are very stressed about childbearing. They don't have much money to, raise their babies. But in some rural areas, people living there, they are very poor, but they still have, strong willingness to have more babies. Then it's a kind of conflict, I think. So I don't know, you are many of scholar professors here, demographers here. So I want to know your point, your suggestions to China's policy making. That's why I, this time, this conference, I'm very cherish this chance to come here and learn some experience, get some suggestions from all of you. Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Lee. I'm sure that you have completed your homework partially, not entirely yet. Okay, thank you once again. Okay, and the other discussion is Seik Kim, economist at the Department of Economics at Korea University in Korea.
Good morning, everyone. So I'm Seik Kim, and I think I'm introduced as an economist. I'm half demographer, maybe a third demographer. First, I would like to thank the presenters for the insightful talks. I learned a lot from these presentations. I learned a lot from this presentation, as well as the presentation in the morning made by Professor Mills. From Tomas' presentation, we have learned that, we have learned many cases from the financial support programs and tax subsidy programs from across many countries. And the general conclusion was that these we have seen a variety of policies, but the result is rather disappointing. I think that was the message. So it was actually good to see that informative to learn about these facts. From Laurent, learned about the French context in a variety of basic allowances with long history, plus some of these tax policies, a very complicated one. But again, I think the message was that these it's not fully efficient. There is some inefficient part of this policy, but it was good to see that this French policies in more in depth. From Isabel, we have seen this effort made by private sectors. So I think it was also very informative for me, and I think for everybody, that the effort is not only made by the government, the national central government, but also at the industry level, and many others are actually doing this effort. In this discussion, I'd like to emphasize that the importance of tailoring policies to each country's specific needs, and comparing these various approaches from many countries allows us to identify what to adopt, which policy to adopt, and which policy to avoid. Maybe some policies that are not effective in some countries may not be effective in other countries, and maybe the other way around. So I think it's a very good opportunity to be on a table and list all these possible policies, and really discuss each of these policies more in depth, and thinking about each country's situation. I think this is going to be a very informative, a very useful opportunity to make a better understanding about these policies. So in that sense, actually, I would like to introduce an aspect of Korean policies. I'm currently working on a research project that investigates the effect of local governments on these fertility issues. This effort, the government effort in raising this fertility in Korea is, of course, done by the central government, but also the local governments, the small municipalities as well. They do have some programs, and I actually want to focus on those. These are mostly baby bonuses. And my findings are not very positive. These baby bonuses across different municipalities in Korea, they have a variety of these policies. Some provide a lump sum subsidy. Some provide distribute the payment over time, maybe 2 years, even 5 years. Some municipalities focus on from the first childbirth, where some local governments focus on the high order births. So we see a variety of these policies, and that accompanied, which means that you can strategically choose where to live depending on your need. And maybe it's not very, in Korean context specifically, this is a very interesting situation because as Professor Mills showed us today, that commuting time in Korea is very long. And let's say if I work in this building, then if I make a radius of a distance of 1.5 hours, it actually covers almost the entire Seoul area. So I can freely live anywhere in Seoul. So I can strategically choose the place, the specific location in Seoul, which gives me the most benefit when I have a child first. And then, well, I can move my location within Seoul, which gives me the best opportunity for child care, and then again move to another place where I can, which provides the best benefit when my kid goes to elementary school. So what I find in this study is that the parents do move strategically. So they collect these baby bonuses, and they relocate their residence. So how I find that is that I use a data set, data that traces the individual's location of living by age, and I actually track the moving behavior of these 0, 1, or 2 years of kids. So when these kids move, then of course they do not voluntarily move their residence. Their parents make the decision. And from this behavior, well, my preliminary, it's still preliminary, that we see a substantial increase in emigration out of that local municipalities after termination of this baby bonus period. So yeah, actually, I think that's it for what I prepared for today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, three speakers, do you have any answer to the questions or comments from advice from discussion first?
Yeah, maybe if I can get started, coming back to the example of Hungary. I think Hungary is a good example for, on the one hand, illustrating that policies which are instrumentalized to increase fertility rates, or which are presented as their main motivation is to increase fertility rates, are not very efficient and are not working well in the long term, because Hungary experienced short-term increases in fertility rates. This is mostly linked to women not postponing parenthood more after the policy was rolled out. After several years, Hungarian fertility rates are more or less in line with fertility rates in other neighboring countries. So as concerns increasing fertility rates through policies don't seem to have fantastic impact. But I would, one of my arguments was that we should think about shifting away from this single-minded, instrumentalized focus on how many extra babies policies bring, and reshifting the focus on policies onto looking at well-being and health of parents and children. This is, I think, the main reason why we have family policies and where family policies should focus. What can our governments do to improve well-being of families and kids, and not how could policies bring some extra kids to be born next year?
Thank you. So thank you for the comments. Maybe a remark on Dr. Kim's relation. So Melinda spoke about the use of causal analysis and looking whether it would be possible to have different policies in different places. And then we have a reversal causality, people moving from one place to the next. So in terms of the rationale of local governments to have a generous policy, it could be thought as a global issue for the metropolitan area. And well, regarding the French example, I would say, like Thomas, the focus now more and more is to take care of the children who are already living in the country and not to the potential children who would eventually be born if the policy would change. So I think this is very important to focus the family policies on the well-being of the families and not the eventual additional fertility. So the criteria, of course, there is the freedom of choice. People, Melinda presented sort of a very negative image of some childless people who were suffering from different things, and childlessness or low fertility could be a symptom of problems in the society. But on the other hand, it may not be a problem if many people choose not to be parents. So this issue of individual choice, I think, is very important. And in France, the advantage of our mess and the very complicated policy is that it is very inclusive. And the idea is very present that the state will help everybody. So there are social differences, social inequalities, but for instance, children born out of marriage, same-sex couples, they have the same rights than the others, and there are specific efforts toward vulnerable families. And nevertheless, maybe this will be my final word, politicians are freaking out. There is a low fertility panic in France, because 1.6 child, which is likely to be the fertility level in France in 2024, is seen as a very huge problem at the political level. And this is totally insane. But it's also the case for migration policy or aging policies. We have a very strong difficulty to discuss seriously with the politicians about demographic issues. And I think that in Korea, we had discussion this morning. There is a huge concern and a trial to look for new solution. I think it's a long way. And in France, also one specificity is that the family policy is more than 60 years, maybe 100 years of support to the families. So this is also part of the confidence of the population in the policy, that it's a long-lasting policy. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, I'm sorry.
Just 1 second, because super interesting to hear, because before my role as CEO in IKEA Korea, I was deputy CEO in IKEA France. And I had this such a discussion 2 years ago already in France. And our 12,000 coworkers in France were also saying the same as the Koreans. For females, it's very difficult to think about having a family, not because of financial aid. Indeed, it's more about the reintegration to work and the respect of their new situation when they come back to work, right? So I think that more and more we see the switch of our interest into not only supporting this couple of months or maybe the first year of the child. It's more about how your life is going to be once you are back to your career. So I always wonder whether this competitive employment market that we have here in Korea has huge impact on that. So this career-oriented country where we live has a huge impact on the decision of the families to have kids, right? That would be my first. And then second is we always do a very professional and deep dive into the gap, gender salary gap in IKEA, because we always aim to have zero. And I have to say that we are quite successful. And this is why we are an employer of choice for a family or people who want to have kids. So it's indeed our policies that we can do as companies that are not going only towards the moment in which the children are born, right? Are more about the support of the career, a lifelong career. And last but not least, is also about lifestyle, indeed. How open we are at just accepting lifestyles, different families, even different households. Indeed, we know we do this Life at Home report where we visit millions of homes every year in the world. And we realize that indeed, for instance, for Korea, the happiest moment at home, and it's very unique in the world, is when you are alone. Enjoying your time alone, taking a nap. By the way, taking a nap. right? Even if you live with your family, even if you live with your children, the moment in which you really feel whole is when you are alone, right? In silence. So how much we respect also these, right? And how much we give room for this different kind of lifestyles and life decisions.
Oh,
I have a question to Professor Torren. Thank you. In your presentation, that is also our problem. It's very difficult for us to calculate the input on each policy, how can it account for the proportion of GDP, like you said your presentation. Yeah, that's the challenge for us these days, because my supervisor's child, compare, China's policy to the European countries, like what percentage in the GDP. It's difficult for us to calculate. But my question is, do you think it's necessary? I mean, to compare this indicate and with the among all these countries like China or Korea, compare this number to the other countries.
Well, a quick answer. First, I think it is very important to make international comparisons, and we can see that all in all, there is more or less a positive relation with the amount of money countries are spending and the level of fertility, which was shown yesterday. On the other hand, a good index for international comparison may not be the best index for each and every country. So it's necessary that when you are looking at specific national studies or maybe comparing, for instance, regions within a country, some important indices will be used that you may not collect for all the countries in the same way. Well, for instance, the cost of education and the importance of education and the education policy. In France, it is very strange. We have this equal opportunity is extremely important in the political talk. We are very bad in that, but people believe in the fact that the child will, the state will take the burden. So they don't say it's too expensive to put children to education. It's very strange, and it's not really rational. So maybe French population will understand once that their educational system is very bad, but for now they don't. And they don't go to private school. Private schools are almost free also. So it's the logic, I think, and the OECD or other international comparisons are very useful to try to put some comparability in the measures. And I think that, Belinda spoke about the data. I think it's very important to have these two sides. International comparisons are key, but they may not be the better index for specific analysis. I don't know whether it answers your question, but.
Okay. For example, the message from this session is especially important to Korean society because even though Korean societies have adopted so-called very good policies of the family or fertility from so-called advanced Western societies, however, we agree that all those policies failed to boost fertility. For example, even though the Korean government spent huge money in implementing those fancy policies in Korean society. And then recently, important policymakers or politicians or national assemblymen, argue that, okay, we need to refer to, for example, Hungary, okay? And they refer to the success story of Hungary as if Hungary succeeded in boosting fertility because Hungary has adopted and implemented this cash support system in boosting fertility. However, when we listen to, for example, Tomas, this is not true, and cash support is not just a part of the whole fertility policy implemented in Hungary. So it means that there's some misunderstanding on the experience of the Hungarian society. However, those important people, such as policymakers or politicians or National Assemblymen, argue that it's time to introduce a Hungarian policy focusing on cash support to Korean society, because there's no way but this cash support, because we have failed in boosting fertility despite introduction of many fancy policies from advanced countries. And as you know or not, these two important experts are very frequently invited to Korean society. So although they don't recognize this or not, your voice is very important to Korean society. So it's time, to say clearly about for example, the effectiveness of this cash support in relation to the fertility policy or family policy, especially focusing on Korean society. Please.
Maybe a word that I say when Korean politicians come to France to know the French magic system. Korea had an extraordinary wealth development, and Korea can be an example for many aspects. And we, in our old Europe and old France, we have many social problems. So, of course, it can be frightening to have fertility at such extremely low level. But maybe after 10 or 20 years, fertility will increase eventually. And seen from France, gender inequality issues and work-life balance issue appear to be more important at the level of fertility. But of course, this is seen from another continent. So Korean people will not become French people, hopefully. So Korea has to find its own way. But it's true that giving money to the family so that they will have children it's not a good solution. I agree with that.
All right. So even though Koreans also recognize that we have not achieved gender equality or work-life balance, even though we say this is a very important for so-called very decent life in Korean society. However, once again, they disregard this important aspect of for example, social life in Korea, for example, work-life balance or gender equality. Then these people argue that it's time to introduce new policy such as cash support from Hungarian society. I think this is a great distortion of the reality based upon the Hungarian society. So, Tomas, you should contribute to Korean society by emphasizing the effectiveness of this cash support system in meeting the challenges of decline of fertility in Korean society. Please.
So I think I cannot agree more with Laurent that Korea is not Hungary. Hungary is not Korea. And even in Hungary, these policies are not fantastically successful in terms of boosting fertility rates. I think we know a lot of issues now about Korean society and a lot of things which can be and should be addressed by family policies. Some of them have to do with money. Housing is expensive. Providing housing or having good access to decent housing is something which is expensive for the governments, where a lot of cash can be wasted or invested well, depends how governments and local governments go about that. I think what we can learn from European experiences as well is that maybe it would be good not to focus only on married couples or couples having a child. If housing provision is universal, like in the Nordic countries in Europe, this will give opportunity to more young people to form partnerships, whatever is their marital status. And if they form partnerships, there will be more babies at the end of the day. I think Korea, we discussed it again and again, the education expenditures parents are facing, and that's a combination of expenditures and time pressures. That's something which we cannot take easy examples from Europe, because in Europe we don't have such a competitive education system and mentality. So European parents would not be willing to spend the amounts of money Korean parents are spending for after-school education, and European parents would not be taking their kids at 10 in the evening for another round of English classes or Korean classes or whatever it is. So that's something I don't have a good advice. It's not just about money. It's about changing the way people are thinking about education success and achievement in life. Yeah, I think I stop here to give floor also to the other speakers.
Thank you. Personally, I'm not sure whether Korean younger generations can be moved when they hear that they would be given, for example, $500,000 as a bonus, baby bonus, okay, when they get married and have a child. So I'm very much skeptical about this cash support system as a potential policy of fertility or family. However, so it's a kind of danger, okay, to debate the effectiveness of this Hungarian case in Korean society, in the context of Korean society. Okay, thank you very much for your very active and productive discussions and presentations. It's time to open the discussion to the floor. Do you have any questions or comments? Yes, question.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much for that wonderful discussion. I just want to raise one issue here, which I think is based on the conversations that we've had now. I think the message has been kind of coming clearly that we know that cash transfers are not having the intended effect of increasing TFR in the way at least it was intended. Now the question is, what is a counterfactual? And what I'm asking is, if you withdrew the cash transfers from families, do we know enough that the TFR will actually not fall down even more rapidly? The reason for that is the message that we are now giving here is that cash transfers are not effective. They're not going to raise TFRs. So if you give this to a politician, they will be quite happy to allocate it to something else. Now, do we know enough to say that actually the amount of cash transfers that are happening in places like Hungary, yes, they're not increasing the TFR, but they are playing a role in maintaining it or slowing down the decline? If we have an answer to that, then I would be very comfortable to say, okay, you know what, this is actually not going anywhere. Let's completely forget about these families that are receiving this amount of money every year, not a big number, but we know it's not going to have the counterfactual effect of actually having a rapid decline. So I would be a little bit more cautious to kind of just saying, let's be very skeptical. Let's withdraw it. It's not working because we don't actually know what's going to happen when it's completely withdrawn. Thanks.
Okay, can I invite other comments? Okay.
From Poland. I have a question to IKEA. How do you handle the discussion and the complaints from the employees who are not having children or not even planning to have children when you are rolling out the strategies supporting families and parents? Because in Poland, we have a lot of discussion about it, how to be, how to justify this kind of decisions and this kind of policies in front of the group of people that are growing, group of people who are not planning to have children. Thank you.
There can be a good answer to this question.
Interesting, because a couple of weeks ago we had this discussion in the team when we organize, and here probably in Korea the discussion is not so advanced as in Poland, because indeed my colleagues in Poland really refer this kind of war in between the different kind of situations in life. We always try to also ask ourselves what means family for these people who decide not to have kids. So, for instance, we are now organizing is very small things, but if we are organizing family days, which is something that in IKEA we do quite often in the world, does that mean that your pet is also part of your family when you don't have kids? And it's a yes, probably, right? So how can we translate what means family to those like me, single without kids? Right. So that's why I was saying that it's important to mirror society when we recruit also, because in that way you also have the voices inside of the company that can say what to expect. Right. but still, I have to say a way to go, because here in Korea, we have maybe not this discussion. There is another discussion that for me was very, very surprising, which is something that in Europe maybe we don't have, which is young generation of male Koreans feeling that they are discriminated. This is the big thing for us, right? So this gender balance in Korea is, in society, the discussion is the other way around than in other countries, right?
All right, thank you. And
thank you very much, for presentation. My name is Seung Back from UNFPA Eastern Southern Africa. I think the case of France is very interesting and potentially be effective in terms of addressing low fertility issues. It's sort of thinking out of the box of how much cash incentive, cash transfer, but beyond that, I think what I want to emphasize is about France's kind of recognition of a variety of family configurations, and including unmarried couple, cohabiting partner, single parents, and blended family as well. All of these diverse family types are legally and financially and socially supported in France, as far as I'm concerned. But however, in many of Asian countries, including South Korea, it is traditionally considered morally ideal to establish a conventional family structure before having children. However, over the past few days, the topic of non-marital childbirth has become a very hot topic here in Korea, raised by one of the superstars here. So people start thinking about what is the family definition, what is all about childcare support. So in this context, I'd like to ask Professor Laurent your insight or viewpoints to what extent such approach that broaden traditional definition of family with diverse childcare support can be applied to other countries, especially including South Korea, considering cultural and societal differences in existence. And this humble point of view to add up is actually tackling, in terms of tackling low fertility issue in Korea without linking labor, the migration policy it would be very difficult. Over. Thank you.
okay, so a very difficult question, because Korea is absolutely different from France, and culture is very diverse and different from each other. Okay, so do we have anything to answer or this comment, both of you?
I can start with the previous comment, actually, about how to measure efficiency of fertility policies. And let me first take a sideway to Hungary again, because I keep hearing about Hungarian success of family policies in the last 2 years, and some journalists are asking me. And at least half of Hungarian success is success of Hungarian government policy propaganda machinery, because Prime Minister Viktor Orbán organizes demographic summits in Budapest, where he invites prime ministers from many other countries and some policymakers, and tells them about fantastic success of Hungarian family policies with perfect numbers shown and selected. So it's kind of difficult to deal with this narrative, which is very strong, and some people take it as granted when they hear about it. But it's really difficult to measure what would happen in the absence of policies, because I mean, we can have different methods. You can use different methods to try to estimate it. The trouble is that there are always so many other policies and so many other things happening in the same period of time, if you look 2, 3, 4 years after a new policy is rolled out. But I want to emphasize one more thing, which we are sometimes very narrow-mindedly focused on TFRs. There is a lot of tempo effect. People can have kids 1 year earlier, 2 years later. I think we should focus much more on long-term impact. What happens within 10 years after a new policy is rolled out, and on impact on cohort fertility measures, childlessness, family size distributions, rather than looking at short-term ups and downs in the TFRs. And I would also love in the discussion about Korea to shift the discussion a little bit away from the obsession whether TFR this year will increase by 0.02 or not, rather looking at more long-term lifetime outcomes of people, their family sizes, and whether they achieved what they wanted or not.
Maybe just a quick answer to your point. Well, first, there was this issue of young men feeling discriminated. Female empowerment implies that men will lose part of their power towards women. That's a fact. And it's very difficult for men, especially old men, to accept that. That's a part of the change of the society. And it seems that in Asian countries, this sort of gender war, as the age war, is more explicit. That in Europe is more hidden. And but I think this is it's a political fight. And it's an ongoing process. And there are still decades, even in Europe, for having gender equality. So I think in Korea, that's an ongoing process. And female empowerment in terms of family role, in terms of professional careers, it's a very big issue. And men feel discriminated, but they are not. And this is to be said very loudly, I think, because our feeling is that the main reason for very low fertility in Asian societies is the issue of gender equality. Women just want to be treated as adults. And this is very complicated because they were used to obey men and men were used to have women obey them. And it's not a simple thing to discuss. And I think this is really core. And when we speak about, of course, there are housing, the cost of education, but this issue of work-life balance and gender equality is a very complicated issue. And this is when we discuss with the Korean politicians, when we start discussing with that, they try to move to another issue because they are not very comfortable on that. And but even in France, it's very complicated. And the idea of inclusive policy, inclusive society, also when I discuss with Christian people, I say that allowing same-sex couple to get married is very important to have a high fertility. Of course, same-sex couple won't have as many children as the others, but it's part of an inclusive society. And this is an issue in France, for instance, nowadays. But in Korea, there are other issues.
Thank you. And any other comments or questions? Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, thank you. A fantastical morning and inspiring discussions. I would like to bring back the Nordic perspective. So I'm from Finland, and we heard Arni ask yesterday about the Norwegian experience, because the fact is that at least in our part of the world, family well-being, gender equality, low childhood poverty was achieved, and it is not enough. And I'm biased because I come from this Nordic fertility collapse. My own perspective is that we need two legs to stand on. One is absolutely, as has been discussed here very well, also by the French voice here, Laurent, we need family well-being. If there's anything at odds between well-being and fertility, I would always prioritize well-being. But Finland and the Nordic countries, we are the world top leaders in all of these measures, basically. Low maternal mortality, high, those who have families with children are basically doing great. And we have nice neighborhoods and nice urban planning and clean water, and it's a nice place to be. I know it from myself, nice place to have a family. And the fertility is collapsing, and it's due to delayed family formation and rising levels of childlessness. Brings us to the second leg to stand on. I do think we need a new narrative, as was said earlier by the Polish representative. We have to have a new public narrative which also clearly says that children are a public good. And this means if we talk about family-work balance, it's great, but it's just not the same from a societal point of view to have a pet or to raise a child. And kind of we need to just acknowledge this. And we need to have family formation policies where we really also kind of support people in having the partnerships and the children they want to have, clearly. So I'm afraid that just talking about family well-being will not, it will not be enough on the social level. I hope I'm wrong. I mean, I wish that could be the way out, but it doesn't seem to work in our kinds of societies. Actually, I think I'm speaking here from my Estonian colleague too. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
Thank you. Julia Bunting, UNFPA, and I'm asking this question actually as an individual, not as a representative of UNFPA, and reflecting in some ways on sort of Melinda's presentation this morning to think differently, and some of the presentations today that I think we've heard, and building on comments yesterday. And it's a rhetorical question. I'm not sure there's an answer, and I'm certainly not approaching this from an ideological perspective, but I wonder to the extent that we are trying to find social and demographic solutions to economic problems, as opposed to economic solutions to social and demographic, and to the extent to which the economic systems that we have are sustainable in the long term. Again, I don't ask this as a question that I'm expecting a response to, but I just wonder as we sit and think about these bigger macro problems, the extent to which we can solve our way out of an economic system that may not be fit for purpose in the long term. It's
Yes.
Thanks a lot. I totally agree with the take that the set of presenters are taking in their final comments. But I have a little question on Laurent's presentation concerning cash transfers, because I think that they are important, but not as a fertility booster, but as a tool, a policy for poverty alleviation. And I'm thinking on the interplay between cash transfers and tax exemptions, because in Latin America nowadays, governments are sort of flirting with tax exemptions with a pro-natalist stance, but tax exemption can have problems, can be regressive, because it depends on which tax you are exempting, but if you are taking into consideration a tax that you pay above a certain threshold and you exempt that tax, it can have a regressive effect. So my question is, you had that in a slide, but you went off very quickly. So I want, if you can give us more detail on that, the reform that France took on that issue, on tax exemption and cash transfers, the interplay between those two things. Was it because it had a regressive effect? It was because it didn't work for whatever it was pretended to work, or for which reason? Because I think it's sort of a dangerous policy in terms of the regressive effect in the income distribution. Thanks.
Yeah, so rapidly, the change took place because the government wanted to make savings, and there was the U shape in the advantage of the family policy, because these tax breaks were very important for the wealthiest. So they cut this, let's say, right part of the U shape to keep the solidarity towards the poor, but to cut this solidarity towards the rich, despite the fact that a rich child is much more costly than a poor child. He must go to holiday, he must have his own room, etc. So the notion of equity in France is highly debated, and there is also past dependency. If you want generous redistribution policy to be accepted, everybody has to be more or less beneficial in a way or the other, so that people accept the policy. At least that's what we say in France. And regarding the fact that in Finland, despite this magnificent society, the TFR is declining, there is also the issue of freedom of choice. People are offered opportunities, they have constraints, they make choice. And if they are happier without a child, I think the situation is completely different with a TFR of, let's say, 1.6 or 1.4 on the one hand, and 0.7 on the other hand. The sort of panic of the population disappearing is just a fantasy in Europe currently, while in Korea, it's a serious problem to be examined with accelerated aging, but also the perspective of having a population diminishing widely. So you seem not to agree with that. Maybe. It's a very serious problem. Yeah, maybe I'm too Frenchy of that, and yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I will just add one, not answer, but also to your rhetorical question. We do see a return on investment always whenever we invest money into family life and involving more our coworkers. So from a macroeconomic point of view, I don't know, but from a micro, it does make sense. Every time that we see, I mean, we retain people, we take less time for recruiting, we take a higher engagement of our coworkers, meaning that the revenue that we create is higher also because our customers are also happier. So whenever we invest into the life choices of our coworkers, we see a return that for sure pays off.
Yes, I would like to quickly respond first to Anna Rotkirch's comments. I think we have to start thinking about you mentioned a new paradigm. I have a story of a new paradigm of low and very low fertility rates. I think in the last decade, we have seen young adults having shifting childbearing preferences, becoming more ambiguous about parenthood. And for different reasons. And of course, the postponement story continues. In this new environment, we cannot expect that the Nordic paradise would keep fertility rates close to 2. I think we will, after the dust settles and fertility rates go a little bit again up and down in different countries, we will have 2 different sets of countries with low fertility rates, which will, I think like Laurent, I think they will be mostly doing just fine, and countries with extreme low fertility rates, which will not do so well. And Nordic countries, I mean, Finnish TFR today is almost double the Korean fertility rate. I wouldn't be so worried about Nordic countries or most of the European countries' fertility rates, even after the collapse which you referred to. Very quickly to Julia's comment, I think extreme low fertility rates, and many demographers, including Stuart, discussed it repeatedly, are also a manifestation of societal dysfunction, of some institutions not functioning. Korea was turbocharged to modernity. It's a fantastically successful society, but we are still living at times when the values and norms of older generations are not aligned with the younger generation's needs, with the economic system as it functions now, with the education achievements, with the gender equality women achieved in opportunities to work. So that's partly the reason, of course, for extreme low fertility as well.
Okay, thank you very much for your very active participation to this session. So to conclude, I don't deny the contribution of this financial support as a measure of the fertility policy in many countries, even including Korea. However, I think we don't have to overemphasize the effectiveness of this monetary policy in dealing with this demographic crisis, including the fertility decline. So we need to talk more about, okay, how to implement, okay, this finance support system in an appropriate and sufficient way, okay, in many countries, including Korea. Okay, thank you very much for your active participation, and this session is over. Thank you.
Thank you, speakers, and also moderator for your insightful exchanges.